And I'm interested to apply this to what you might call this sort of sense-making space that we've been kind of investigating. Sort of these concepts of game B, non-rivalrous dynamics, rule omega. Like, this is what's been quite shocking, I think, for me, and maybe for you, I don't know, is that even these particular concepts can be weaponized as well for self-serving ends. How does that work, and has that surprised you?
The moment that there is an ambiguous idea like game B, which is kind of a placeholder for what would a healthier civilization be, then to the degree that that starts getting traction and people are interested in it, people being associated with it because it's getting traction and it seems like there will be power there, whether their motives are really of game B or not, is obviously going to happen. And then also people trying to capture the flag and say game B is ... the thing that they're doing is also going to happen. So I think actually, placing a flag like that attracts capture is not a straightforwardly good idea. I'm not saying it's definitely a bad idea, but it's definitely not a straightforwardly good idea. And I think conversations like this, hopefully, can lead to more earnest exploration on our own part, not calling each other out. Like, there is a time, there's a way to help support collective intelligence, that if we see someone doing something that we think is off, that we share it in a way that is actually of good faith, trying to help them do better. There's also another method of call-out culture that is really just a weapon to take out people who are not part of the narrative that we're creating. You and I saw in certain online forums conversations, I think Jordan Hall and Jamie Wheel and I had a conversation sitting right here on this couch, and we talked about rule omega, and that was shared. And then we saw people invoking rule omega as a tactic to get other people to include them in a conversation where the way that they showed up in conversation did not compel the other people to include them. And the way we actually articulate rule omega is that it cannot be invoked by others, it has to be granted.
Shall we just recap what rule omega is? It's basically giving the benefit of the doubt and calling out, assuming the other person is trying to express something meaningful and helping to tease that out in the interaction. So rather than nixing it, yeah.
And so rule omega is this kind of process where with those we are seeking to collaborate, we grant a level of giving the benefit of the doubt. You shouldn't do this with everyone, right? Like if somebody comes up to me on the street and they seem like they're trying to con me in some way, I don't give them rule omega and assume that they have good intention and are thoughtful. That would actually be dumb. And if someone is engaging in mostly rhetoric with me, and they also don't seem that they are seeking to understand clearly, that it actually is not warranted. And so rule omega is basically when I am trying to engage with people who might think differently, but I think that I'm not positive that I'm right and they're wrong if there's a difference. If there's a difference, I think I might possibly have something to learn. Then rule omega is how I would engage that would best increase my chance of learning the thing, which is only relevant if I want to learn stuff that I maybe don't already know, and especially learn stuff that might even be different than stuff that feels actually important to me. And this is where there's a courage and an earnestness and a sincerity that's really critical. Now, there's a level of give the benefit of the doubt that in general is a nice rule of thumb to err in the direction of, right? Try and hear where someone is coming from. But when someone else is on the offense in a actively kind of weaponized way or whatever, I might not do that. I also have the right to not engage with someone, factoring the very limited time of life that I have and that I can't engage with everyone, that doesn't feel like the best use of my time to advance the things that I care most about. Even if it's caring for everyone, I might not see that as the right place to go. So if someone says, rule omega, give the benefit of the doubt, therefore you have to listen to me and engage with me and answer all my responses, that's actually weaponizing, give the benefit of the doubt. And there are similar things where insofar as we were referencing, I don't remember the quote from Ecclesiastes, but everybody knows it. There's a time to kill and a time to heal and a time to sow and a time to reap and a time to every purpose under heaven, something like that, which I take as that all of the rules are generally rules of thumb, where there are some exceptions. There are edge cases where I can't just say I'm following the rules, in which case I'm actually not a human with choice. I am a bot. I have to say I'm reserving the right to make a choice outside of any rule set aligned with the best principles. Principles aren't rules. Principles are considerations, but where I don't necessarily know what I will do, because there might be a time for any particular kind of thing. So there is a time to not give the benefit of the doubt. There is a time to try and get over the energy of conflict and really do apartheid reconciliation, peace and reconciliation work. There's other times to draw boundaries where the other side is actually really not engaging in good faith and a boundary is actually necessary. Now, I can weaponize the idea of boundaries and draw them where I actually should be crossing the boundary to try and listen. I can also weaponize the idea of break down the boundaries and listen to each other when drawing a boundary is the appropriate thing. And so the moment anyone holds, there is a principle that is sometimes true, therefore I can say it's true whenever I want it to be. Right? This is another place where it's not just truth can be weaponized in terms of data, but a true rule of thumb can be weaponized when it is actually not the appropriate thing to do. The moment that we say game B or IDW or whatever it is, and it seems like a lot of people are being attracted, where then if someone became associated with that thing or made a project of that type or made a media channel of that type or became a speaker there, they would up-regulate their public presence or profile or something. Now it becomes a honeypot that's going to attract people for actually exactly game A reasons to exploit game B virtue, right? And so this is the virtue signaling thing, which is actually maybe a good thing for us to talk about now. Insofar as game B is talking about a better world, insofar as it has epistemics, how do we do better sense making, those epistemics can be weaponized, and we can talk about how critical thinking and how dialectics and whatever can be weaponized. But insofar as it's also talking about not just what is true, but what is good, right? Like in the true, the good, and the beautiful kind of sense, what is the kind of world we're wanting to build? Then, of course, any virtue can be weaponized, which is virtue signaling. And again, I'm talking about topics that everybody's talking about right now. I'm just hopefully trying to talk about them in a slightly different way to say everyone on all sides are oriented to do versions of this, as opposed to those guys are virtue signaling, and us calling them out is us demonstrating our actual virtue, but we're not virtue signaling. And so one way that I think of the distinction between real virtue and virtue signaling is virtue signaling is when it's clear that enough people hold a particular trait as a virtue that if I seem to have that virtue, it would be good for me, right? The people would like me, accept me, agree with me, buy my stuff, like my ideas, whatever it is. So if I signal, if I communicate in some way that I have that virtue, it's beneficial for me in straight self-serving ways, right? So I have a reason to signal the virtue beyond my authentic living of it. And this is where, rather than I'm just doing what I'm doing and people notice the virtue that I happen to be living, I am intentionally trying to seem virtuous of a particular kind more than I am trying to actually live that thing, right? And this is where Jesus saying, don't let the right hand see what the left hand was doing. And I think every culture that has wisdom has some quotes like that, because virtue signaling is forever, right? And it's whatever the dominant culture is, whatever the thing that is seen as virtue there. So during the early Soviet empire Marxist ideology, people would virtue signal being more Marxist, right? And during Dark Age Catholic reign, the virtue signaling was about being better Catholics. And, so now left and right have their own versions of virtue signaling to their own base. And so politicians and companies and social leaders are oriented to signal the thing that they would need to in that way. A real virtue is something that I care about, that I value. Actually, hopefully, something that is sacred to me. That I am willing to experience personal sacrifice for. Not that my signaling of it creates personal gain, but I am willing to lose personal gain in service of this because it's more important than personal gain to me. So I'm willing to lose some dollars to have my company not do that thing because I hold a virtue or an ethic that won't have me do that thing even if it would make me more dollars. Or I'm willing to lose some followers or get some people disliking what I'm saying or whatever to stand up for something because I actually meaningfully believe in it, right? Most people are willing to be disliked by the group that they identify as enemies. They might even take pride in it because they're doing in-group, out-group, Machiavellian stuff. But am I willing to lose likes and support by the people that I'm trying to in-group with is where it's actually consequential, because losing the ones that I've already lost isn't consequential. So then I get to weaponize, see, I'm willing to make a sacrifice and have enemies, which is actually weaponizing the idea of sacrifice itself. We can also see that, the difference between virtue and virtue signaling is real virtue is not trying to signal to other people something. It is trying to actually live something, and it is willing to stand for something where it is personally disadvantageous. And so you can see someone's virtue in the series of choices they have made that have been hard choices. So when someone tells me that they're interested in impact investing with their financial services fund, I go through and I say, show me in record the series of investment choices you made where you turn down money because of an ethic. Just show me the record of those. And usually they can't do a good job at that. And then I say, fuck off. Because I know that now impact investing just happens to be the virtue that signals a particular niche of capital or whatever. But there's no real earnestness in it, right?